Okay, just letting the last couple of people in. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very last GSA event of 2020. So my name is Kerry Hallard. I'm the Chief Exec of the Global Sourcing Association, and I'm joined today by 6 of my fantastic colleagues that work beside me on the GSA Council. And I'd like you to introduce yourselves now. So I will allow you to introduce yourself, Chairman Mark Devonshire.
Hi, Mark Devonshire. Good morning, all, and happy Christmas to you all. Mark Devonshire, so I'm the chair of the GSA, and my evening job is that I run global delivery for entity data services. So I keep busy across GSA and NTT.
Excellent, thank you. And Barry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barry Matthews. I'm the managing partner of Resource Consulting, which is a new consulting firm helping organizations to access open talent and open innovation. Prior to setting up Resource in October this year, so we're very, very new. I was the managing partner of ISG's business in the UK. Prior to that, I ran Allsbridge's business in Europe, and prior to that, I ran Source. So been in the sourcing advisory world for a very long time.
Okay, thanks, Barry. I'm just going in the way I can see you on my screen, so don't feel victimised. So, Sunita.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So, Sunita Hirani. I'm a senior contract manager at the BBC. I'm placed in supplier relationship management in procurement division of the BBC. So just making sure that there's best value for money and holding suppliers to account in the contract and commercial.
Okay, thank you, Sunita. And Terry.
Hi there, just turn off mute. Hi, I'm Terry Walby. I've been in the business and technology services industry for all of my career. In 2013, I founded a company called Thoughtonomy, which built an intelligent automation software as a service platform, which was acquired in 2019 by Blue Prism, one of the leaders in robotic process automation. And I now head up a function for Blue Prism called Blue Prism Ventures, which is looking at new ways to grow the footprint of intelligent automation across new geographies and new go-to-market approaches.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Steve.
Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Watson here. I'm managing consultant at Peru Consulting. And I focus particularly on sourcing and commercial. My background has kind of been on both the supply side and the buy side, and kind of major IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing transactions. And my side job, I guess, at Peru is I also look after our channel partner network, which is something we've been actively developing over the last 12 months or so.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And last but by no means least, Graeme.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Graeme Matheson. I'm a partner in John Lewis, and I lead the outsource delivery of customer contact to John Lewis customers. So if you call, email, chat, or web chat with John Lewis, you'll be speaking to somebody who has the pleasure of being looked after by me. I've been in customer contact and contact centres for about 27 years across a variety of industries.
Okay, thank you all. So I'm going to ask for engagement here, please. So please do post any questions you've got, any comments. The only subject that is off limit is where is my John Lewis parcel? So that's the only subject that's off limit today. Graeme cannot answer that. So, okay, so wow, what a year. I'm not going to talk about COVID. I think we're completely COVIDed out, but I am going to take this opportunity to massively applaud the global technology and business services industry. So from every conversation I've had across our entire membership base and with my partners around the world, the feedback has been that the industry has performed exceptionally well. So pulled out all the stops to ensure that their customers and their own companies, if they're working in global in-house centres, have managed to not just keep the lights on, but absolutely keep the wheels turning. So the first thing I'd like to do is give a massive round of applause to everybody working in our industry, because I think you've done a phenomenal job. So as a result of that, despite the pandemic, our research that we've worked with Everest Group in the last few months shows that the industry grew. The industry grew by about 1%. And the prediction is that the industry is set for a significant growth over the next few years. So I personally believe that technology and business services are going to be front and centre of both organisations and governments' restart strategies around the world, and the opportunity for us to really make a difference is phenomenal. So I think this is a time for the industry to really shine moving forward, and to show its true value in transformation and delivering business value to companies and to their customers around the world. But I'm not going to just sit here and give you my view. I will chip in and give you my view, but I really want to get the view of our experts. So what we've done is we've pulled together a cross-section of members of the GSA, who I think can talk to every single hot topic that I believe the industry is going to be facing in the years ahead. But first of all, I want to have everyone else's view on how well they think the industry performed, where they think the industry might have fallen short, and where they thought the industry excelled. So I'm randomly going to pick people, and I'm going to start with you, Mark.
So, I mean, I think I'm not going to chime on about how well we did, because I think it did do well. However, my observation is that in actual fact, we are largely making do with the tools that we had previously. So we're getting by, we're surviving, and the vaccine will take another, whatever, 6, 9, 12 months for the world. And I think the next 12 months means that there has to be a step change in some of the tools we're using. So the Zoom tools and the Microsoft tools, Teams tools that we've got, we had this tool back in February. And there are tools now available in the marketplace and services available in the marketplace that step changes. So I think in actual fact, we will see even more technology and collaboration that comes forward. And I think that's the challenge that we've seen. We've got by, we've survived, but now we need to transform in some of the ways we work.
Okay, Sunita, what have you seen from the service providers you've been working with at the BBC?
I think it's been a mix. I mean, reflecting on the last conversation or the last panel I was on with you, Kerry, was when we were talking about restarting the UK, and we were talking about remobilisation at that time from the first lockdown. And I think it's fair to say that the challenges that been faced by most organisations have been to do with the economic downturn, logistic issues. Graeme will understand that completely. Emotional, financial resilience, morale, dare I say, uncertainty, and of course the market unpredictability. So I think that's across probably all organisations. But for the BBC, the challenges stood in obviously people and making content and just staying on air. So, and that really relied heavily upon strong partnerships, and that's not only in the sense of employees but with our suppliers as well, to kind of enable that. So that's reflecting on where we were and restarting the UK, coming out of the first lockdown. But going forward, it's fair to say that our kind of predictions and our focus from a sourcing procurement perspective will lie in sort of 3 main areas, and that's people, technology, which you've already touched on, and the tools as well. So we can talk a little bit about that in a little while, but it's definitely there, and it's working more in terms of responsible procurement, sourcing, smarter, and really looking at how we can redefine processes.
Okay, thank you, Sunita. And I'm going to come straight to you, Steve. Obviously, Peru is a consultancy advising both sides. What have you seen?
Yeah, well, I think we kind of, see three clear stages of evolution. So the first one being the kind of tactical changes organisations made to, on the one hand, contain costs. So we would have had some engagements around cost optimization and rationalization with a number of organisations, and also at the same time enabling their workforces to work remotely. And some amazing work, some amazing stories of organisations who kind of overnight moved to work in a remote manner. So that's kind of the tactical stage. What I think we're starting to see now, and I think it was kind of hinted at by Mark there, was organisations moving into the adaptation phase. So looking at sort of channel shift, for example, and what that means for their end-to-end service delivery, and also looking beyond that in terms of where there are opportunities to innovate and potentially disrupt in the marketplace. So again, and then turning first that adaptation phase, again, we're working with clients now who are looking at the longer term landscape in terms of work anywhere and how they actually refresh or supplement their tool sets and the technology and their ways of working to adapt to more kind of remote working as a more permanent way of delivering service. And also, I think a term we're going to see coming up quite a lot in the next year and beyond is this one of collaboration hubs. So these organisations are moving away from large, kind of sort of sprawling, centralised offices to kind of more local, regional, smaller spaces where teams can get together to work on projects and hothouse and get together and have some social interaction. So that's some of the things I've kind of seen as we move on this sort of journey from tactical to adaptation and ultimately into innovation and disruption.
Okay, thanks. So before we move into some of those key topics that you've mentioned there, did anybody feel that the industry let itself down in any way? Is there anywhere that we actually fell short? No. Excellent.
I think we should pat ourselves on the back as an industry. I think we could never ever have planned for this year, and millions of people all at the same time, all moving to remote working. No BCP plan could ever have had that in it. Certainly from my experience, service providers didn't pull out contracts and say, you suddenly need to, or clients didn't pull out contracts either and say, suddenly this isn't in our SLA or this isn't in our contract. I think there was such great partnership and trust being demonstrated. I think some of that might come back to bite us in that, security may have been lapsed because we were rushing from priority to get delivery done as opposed to thinking about how work from home security was implemented, for example. But I think just about every service provider that I'm aware of in client relationship really pulled out all the stops and bent over backwards to deliver.
Yeah, I would echo that. I can't recall of any client approaching us and asking for a contract review or talking about any kind of commercial disputes with suppliers. And there's been a huge amount of flexibility on both the buy side and the supply side, realizing that the answer doesn't lie in pulling out the contract. The answer lies in collaborating and flexibility in terms of sort of delivering in these extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember back to our very first webinar in COVID, and it was all talk about force majeure and getting people ready for force majeure, which never actually came to fruition, thankfully. So Graeme, moving on to obviously the biggest change, and that is that move towards remote working. Obviously that must have been a huge logistical challenge for you. Do you want to talk about where you think that's going to go into the future now? Are you going to stay remote working?
Yeah, so yes, I think we will, and I think there are a couple of things that I'm aware of, and I think we all probably need to be aware of in terms of remote working, and that historically remote working has worked well for people who choose remote working as a way of operating. What we effectively did was take a bunch of fairly sociable, in our case, a bunch of fairly sociable contact center advisors and partners and store partners, and chucked them all to work from home. Now, some of those people will enjoy that more than others. Some of them enjoyed it in the short term more than others. I think we need to recognise as an industry that we can't just assume that because we've given them a laptop and put them in their living room, that they love it and that will be their future way of working. I think that talk of contact centres and large offices being the things of the past is not entirely true. I think that there will be locations, whether it's some form of hub and spoke model or some form of limited office space, that people will continue to populate, albeit perhaps on a short-term or intermittent basis. We can't just suddenly say, well, we've given somebody Zoom and we've given them a laptop and there you go and crack on. I think for us as well, particularly in the retail space, you must have been living in a cave if you've not seen some of the challenges that have been happening in the retail space in the last few weeks, where retailers have failed to keep up with the pace of change of customer experience requirements in that online space. Just because you've got a website doesn't mean that you're a successful online retailer. And when I think of John Lewis in particular, where the reason John Lewis have done so well is because we've been fabulous at delivering customer experience. Now, an element of that has been because we've been great at heroic recovery, and an element of that has been just because we're great at engaging with customers. That's particularly difficult with a customer base that's perhaps not interacted with you in a digital manner previously. So we need to make sure that we can continue to engage those partners who have been great at delivering service in store in delivering service through a digital channel. So I think that for us, working from home will continue to be a key part of the way that we deliver service. Although I think that, and to come to Barry's area of specialism, I think that we will have to move to a more flexible way of operating, whether that's purely in the gig economy or whether that's just about allowing our partners to spend some time in stores and some time delivering service to customers virtually.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody got a build on that? So Sunita, at the BBC, what's happening in terms of working from home for you?
So the message is to continue to work from home because, we're still in those kind of uncertain times. And as Mark said earlier, vaccines in process and in progress. So safety first. And, the consistent message has been that employee safety and health and safety is prime and priority. So, so virtual remote working is on the cards, I think, until at least spring. But I think more and more it's becoming the way of working. It's no longer a new way of working, it is the way of working. But I think there will be, as Steve said earlier, that there will be collaboration hubs for people to kind of have that social interaction and have a small, sort of more intimate kind of meet place, so that we can work in collaboration and have that same level of interaction that we once knew.
Okay, so what do we think this is going to mean for sort of like real estate moving forward? Do you think we're going to see a complete change to, city structures and Canary Wharf, for example? Barry?
I do, yeah. I agree with everybody else. I think we're not going to all stay working from home, and we will reach some sort of balance and happy medium. We're not all going to go back to commuting into offices every day either, and so there will be some sort of balance achieved. But we're already seeing it. Employers are starting to look at their real estate and saying, do I really need all these physical office spaces, which are a huge cost to us? So what else can we do with them? And retailers are thinking the same thing. So if you take Canary Wharf's a great example. You've got so much retail space and so much office space. Our post-COVID world is going to be different. We won't need all of that retail space and all that office space. So there's a lot of thought going into, do you create entertainment, centres? How do you use digital technology to entertain people when they work or when they shop, to try and entice them back in? But there will certainly be more residential units being transformed from office blocks. We will see a different city landscape. I'm sure, we're already seeing in rural areas property prices going up because people realizing they're not going to need to commute as much in the future, and there will be a move away from cities, I'm sure. But it will, it won't be as extreme as some people are predicting. It will level out. It'll be an interesting few years to see where it all lands.
Yeah. So what does this specifically mean for the technology and business services industry? How are service providers going to adapt, and what are the different contracting models going to look like when the teams that deliver the services could be based anywhere around the world? So I'm going to go to you first, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few dimensions to that in terms of contracting models. I mean, we've certainly seen this year a marked downturn in sort of new outsourcing transactions. I think you would have mentioned, Kerry, that by the end of the year we got to about 1% growth, but there was certainly a significant downturn initially, and you know, understandably organisations being nervous about the future, not wanting to enter into long-term contracts. So I think we'll see quite often shorter contracts. I think we'll see contracts that have a greater degree of flexibility built into them. I think we'll see contracts that start to take supplier innovation seriously. It's, you know, in a lot of contracts up to now, it's kind of been a bit of a sidebar. Yeah, we're interested in your approach to innovation. I think we'll see that becoming more front and centre in contracts going forwards. And I think we'll, you know, in some circumstances, we'll see, you know, contracts that allow for significant change over the term of the contract rather than kind of being seen as fixed and immutable. We'll see contracts that have much more flexibility built into them over the coming terms. And, you know, that's it's a moving feast in terms of, you know, what that might look like in an individual organisation or an individual supply contract. But I think flexibility and innovation will be key in terms of what those contracts look like going forwards.
Okay, so your opinions, both Sunita and Graeme, on that. What sort of changes have you seen in the contracts that you're managing or that you're tendering?
Do you want me to come in that first, Sunita?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think, you know, when I look back to the not too distant past, I was signing contracts that historically bought hours and perhaps had some risk and reward metrics in there around about customer experience. When I look to the contracts that I'm signing these days, whilst buying hours might form one of the key parts of the commercial mechanism, there is a lot more commercial flexibility and benefit in there for both the supplier and for us as a buyer in terms of exactly that innovation. And it's about enabling delivery of services to the customer through the use of technology. I think we've probably been a little bit of a slave in the past to the next sexy new innovation of you've got to be in the web chat space, you've got to be in the digital conversation space. We've gone down those rabbit holes. I think that actually as we move to the future, we're perhaps going to be a little bit more innovative in the terms of what it is that we're actually trying to get out of the back of any new technology that we're buying. And is it just about us buying a service, or is it actually about us entering into a more flexible commercial arrangement that spreads some of the benefits, but equally perhaps spreads some of the risk?
And did you say that in terms of, Graeme, in terms of more outcome-focused contracts where perhaps the inputs are less rigidly defined? It's about delivering the outcomes and taking the flexible approach to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And I think that part of that, you know, when I look at some of the conversations I've had in the last 24 months about that kind of stuff, part of that, I think that the suppliers need to be on board with that as much as we do. Because that is a way more risky way of contracting for some than perhaps it has been in the past, when a vendor can rock up, sell you a software service, and then, you know, walk away with a big fat commission and leave the buyer to sort out what anything happens down the line. When you suddenly start trying to spread that risk, you know, what we're not going to do is enter into a situation where we spread that risk but drive up the cost in order to mitigate that risk. Yeah. It's about making sure that both parties are absolutely committed to delivering the outcome in the long run.
Yeah, I completely agree and echo most of that what you've said there, Graeme. What I would say is that, you know, from a BBC perspective, we need to be very mindful of the public and the sector that we belong to, that we serve, and how we're carefully regulated as well. So what I will say, whereas I agree with the whole contract and the flexibility required in there and how that might change as we go forward, I think there's a strong sense in business remodeling and really strengthening our supply chains and the relationships that we have, because I think first and foremost, I think we can all agree on how, you know, that the suppliers have really shown up and supported our organisations is way beyond, you know, showing the contract and going back to the contract. So I think fundamentally the focus is on sort of business remodeling, making sure that we can and focus on a preparation and relationships, so that's strengthening our supply chains, and you know, that might mean that when I mentioned responsible procurement earlier, that might mean that we look at shorter supply chains, you know, looking at more local suppliers. That might mean a more diverse approach, and that might mean that we look at more sustainable supply chains from that respect as well. From a technology point, you know, if we look at responsible sourcing in that sense, it could mean that we're cutting costs of transportation and method of transactions and those kind of things as well. From a tools perspective, you know, responsible sourcing could mean that we're like I said about the sustainability and the supply chains in that respect. So I think it is contracts and flexibility and how that might be agile to responding to the organisation's needs. But I think first and foremost, it must be about business remodelling and strengthening the relationships that you have.
Okay, thank you, Sunita. So, Mark, one of the pieces of work we're doing at the GSA is Service Provider 2.0. So that's looking at the way service providers are massively changing their approaches and ways of working with their customers. You're a service provider. How have you changed, and what changes do you think still need to be made across the sector?
So, I was reflecting on what outsourcing, that term that perhaps we don't like to use, but if we look at the journey on outsourcing, so outsourcing started and it was characterised by TUPE, taking people on, transferring people and trying to do better. Then we moved into the phase of actually nearshoring, offshoring, which was around a cost profile and moving workload. Now we're in the phase of actually delivering services using technology. And so it's all around buying tech. And as Graeme said, it's around buying the outputs, not around buying groups of people that deliver service. But I think more importantly, what does that mean for our business? So the role that people now play in service providers is actually managing the technology that delivers the services. So they're actually constantly looking at how to improve the technology, how to take the exceptions of the technology, how to manage bots. And clearly the change in educating and reskilling people is going into that labour pool. I think coming back to, I guess, where we are in the UK as well, and the UK economy, we've almost got the perfect storm in the UK. So we've got this thing called Brexit, and we've got a struggling economy or an economy in change. And I think we in the UK have a great chance to actually become world leaders again in terms of tech and people that deliver tech. And I think that is really unique. And that's what I think my prediction for the industry and people in the UK, and I'm being quite UK centric, is that in actual fact, there will be investment in the UK, there will be investment in our people, there will be skills development and reskilling of our people. And I think that's a great opportunity for all ages and across our industry, and especially the education sector as well, in terms of developing the skills for tomorrow. So that's one of my key predictions, the fact that UK will rise again to be top in the world in terms of tech and tech development. And you know, you can come on to the technologies, but I think that would be my view of service provider and how we're transforming. I have to say the biggest blocker clearly is our legacy, and our legacy pulls us back from where we want to be all the time. And that is a challenge around how do you constantly change your legacy and reinvest in your legacy to take you forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that comes neatly on to you, Terry. So obviously you've been at the forefront of the automation industry for a number of years. We've been saying at the GSA for ages that organisations, service providers should take an automate first approach, and too many of them have been laggards. What are you seeing? Have you seen that having changed now?
Yeah, I think really a key theme I think that we've seen emerge, you know, in this year, and that will endure, is the importance of agility to business, the ability to react quickly to unexpected circumstances, to adapt, to change, to pivot. The things that small startup companies do quite easily, and that big organisations struggle with. You know, just the managing change. And you know, if I reflect on the industry and the use of technology in delivering business services over the past few years, the barrier often to widespread and large scale adoption hasn't been the tech itself, hasn't been the ability of tech to deliver value. It's been the ability of businesses to adopt it, to adapt it, and to exploit it. The cultural barriers, the political barriers, the change, the momentum that's required, the need to manage all of the various stakeholders across a business to get everybody to say yes before you actually do anything, and all of those things that within an organisation really hold it back. And in a service provider customer relationship, you know, the things that the service provider brings to their customer that the customer says, I'm not ready for that yet, and therefore doesn't adopt, which limit the ability of a supplier to innovate and change. And what we've really seen in the last 10 months, and there's lots of reports that have said, you know, we've seen 10 years of innovation in 10 months, and it's true. And that's really not necessarily about the technology that's emerged. It's about the willingness to adopt technology at a much more rapid rate. And so, you know, in our world, automation and artificial intelligence, that's been a significant change as businesses have really started to say, this is important, this is strategic to us, and this is going to drive or going to underpin our ability to be able to not just deliver what we need to today, but to be able to have a more reactive and agile organisation in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come back on that, Kerry?
Yeah.
So as I guess as a buyer of the services that Terry and his peers have rocked up and sold to us, I think that, you know, we need to recognise that all businesses have to do due governance, and I absolutely accept that we need to be more nimble in that place. But I think that for us, the automation journey that we've been on as a customer service provider, we have done bucket loads of automation in our back office, and it feels like we're probably in a place where we're pretty much done. The next leap for us is going to be about automation into customer-facing interactions. Now, if the challenge that you face is if you rock up to John Lewis and say, we want to start automating customer interactions, given that customer service is our USP, what you're effectively pitching to our exec team is that we want to start getting AI to talk to customers. That suddenly it's a massive risk and a real danger to us as a business, partly because we just don't understand it. And you know, I know what my reaction to Terry would be when he turns up with his latest AI solution would be, show me where you've demonstrated that working for another high street retailer, because I'm not going to be first to market. And I know that if I adopt it, I'm sure it'll be a remarkable success. But I think that the risk that you take is that I will always expect you to have a blue chip client on board already that I can learn from their experience. And we run the risk, I think, as an industry that we try to pitch too big, too far in terms of some of this AI stuff. And, you know, if somebody turns up to me and says, Graeme, I can nick 1,000 seats out of your contact centres and automate them, that will actually turn me off. I would much rather somebody turned up and said, I can take 20 seats and I'll take a chunk of the risk and demonstrate that it works before you turn up with that big pitch. And I think it's that natural conflict where the desire to sell has to overcome my desire to be massively risk averse.
I think that's a really interesting point, Graeme, if I may respond. I think actually what we've seen is a big change between the rationale for AI and automation being cost reduction to the rationale being about business transformation or digital transformation, about delivering a better customer experience, about delivering a better outcome. So yes, you're right. 2 or 3 years ago, the conversation would have been, how many heads can I take out of my contact center or my back office? It's not anymore. It's about how can I improve the experience of my customers, of my colleagues, of my business. And on the subject of AI in the contact center, particularly where you're doing customer interactions, my experience has been the only way to make that successful is to be transparent with the customer. If you try and disguise a bot as a human being and a human interaction, that's a journey that delivers a poor customer experience every single time. If you allow a customer to make a choice, do you want to wait in the queue for an agent, or do you want to interact with a piece of technology that might be able to answer your question more rapidly? Give them the choice, and customers will self-select the thing that delivers them the outcome, and they'll tolerate a level of interaction with an AI solution that isn't as true, as rich as a human to human experience. It never will be, and we shouldn't try and pretend it will.
Yeah, I do think, to pick up on Graeme's point, the RPA industry particularly in a way did itself a disservice when the major software vendors became so incredibly competitive, and certainly the other two who haven't gone public were just trying to flog as many licenses as they possibly could. So I mean, there was certainly a lot of, and probably still is to some extent, of over promising and undelivering, and because it's relatively easy to buy and relatively low cost, you see a lot of licenses which were gathering dust and not really delivering the strategic outcomes that clients had been promised. I think that's changing a little bit. That was probably a couple of years ago, and we've now matured as an industry and people are understanding it. So we've probably got better at that, I think. But certainly there are lots of enterprise customers out there who haven't got yet what they were promised originally. And so I think the industry is playing catch up to a certain extent.
Okay, thanks, Barry. I was going to come to you next and ask for your opinion on whether service providers were, embedding automation in their propositions. But I also wanted to get your opinion on service providers and how they're actually resourcing. So obviously, resource is focused on open talent. Do you want to give us your predictions for the future of open talent?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think if we think about what enterprise organizations and service providers focused on this year, it's about, well, as Terry said, agility, definitely having to move really quickly, but also resilience. And certainly with service providers, it's achieving non-linear growth. How can I grow my business without having to rely on headcount? And both automation and then flexible talent models enable you to do this. And so we see service providers majoring on both of those aspects. If I think about talent, what I've found fascinating over the last 18 months, but then particularly the last 9 months, and why I left ISG to set up Resource, is that I just saw this change in the industry where organizations are realizing that they can access talent that's global and that's enabled through digital platforms. And that at a time when they're trying to reduce their fixed cost base and move to flexible cost models, and of course, try to find the best digital talent so they can be as innovative as possible, they suddenly can start to use one of the many platforms. There are 300 digital platforms out there which will link buyers and sellers of lots of different things, but particularly technology. So you've got 70 million freelancers in the world and growing at 24%. And so if you're a service provider and you've got hundreds of thousands of employees, which so many of them have, if there's a way of flexing that to access freelance talent that you only pay for the use of, and then provide services to your to your clients, and that's quite an attractive option for you. And so service providers are now looking at their options to say, well, could we build our own talent platform and start attracting freelance workers to work for us, be that in IT outsourcing or in business processes or in customer experience. What should our strategies be? And they're also aware that clients will start to do that as well over time. So a client might, rather than going to one of the major service providers, go to a platform or a platform-based service provider. You've got organizations like Turing.com. Turing.com, relatively new, come out of Silicon Valley. They've got 180,000 software developers, so bigger than most outsourcers, from 10,000 cities covering 100 different disciplines. And AI effectively recruits these people from around the world, so targets them on LinkedIn and what have you. They go through an AI-driven process, and only 1% of the candidates that try to join Turing.com pass. And then some of them are freelance and some of them are full-time. The account management, the client management, the program management, the architecture, etc., is all done by full-time Turing resources. Will be a mixture of on-site and off-site, but the delivery from their 180,000 developers covering 100 disciplines is all done remotely, 100% distributed, 100% remote. And that to me is the future of how outsourcing is going to be disrupted. These disruptive, progressive organizations like Turing, and there are so many others out there as well now coming on board, will inevitably disrupt the major outsourcing providers because they're able to offer this flexible cost model. They're able to respond so incredibly quickly, and it'll take time, of course, but I do think these open talent and open innovation models and automation will enable new service providers to come on board and existing service providers to disrupt their current traditional models to become more innovative and become more agile and become more resilient.
Is it fair to say as well, Barry, that it's starting to move from the kind of, I suppose, the traditional sort of areas such as software engineering into kind of much more broad range of services? So you've got platforms such as Hallard Street, which is kind of bringing freelance consultants in front of clients. Do you see that continuing? Do you see that market share growing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think of gig, which is often what this is referred to, you think of Uber drivers or Deliveroo or Just Eat or what have you. But actually what we're seeing is a significant increase in really skilled workers being able to use digital platforms. So Helper Street's a great example. That's basically management consultancy. You look at One Circle, that's HR expertise. Who would have thought you'd actually go to a platform to get put in touch with a really specialist HR experts? And the same for lawyers, for computer scientists, for chief execs and for CIOs. You can buy them on demand, so you've got a flexible workforce, and we'll definitely see an increase in that type of highly skilled access. Now, and again, don't assume that you just go onto a platform and that's it. Most of these are curated platforms, so it's part sort of human managed and part but just the delivery and all of the operation, the timesheeting and the invoices and the matching, all done via digital platform. And I think that's what we'll see a lot of in the future.
And another point we've touched on, Barry, but it's worth just talking about again in terms of the UK specifically. There's a potential disruptor, which is the reimposition of IR35 into the private sector. I think you felt that had kind of pluses and minuses in terms of the impact on gig work.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And IR35 will come in place on April the 1st next year. I don't think it will be delayed again. It will inevitably put some people off the sort of freelancing lifestyle. But what it will do, in my opinion, will lead to more people using digital platforms. If you're a freelancer and you're on a digital platform and it's a project, you're very explicitly doing a project and then using that platform to look for the next project. You're not replacing a full-time employee typically. So I think we'll see limits on project durations, and we'll see people moving from one to another. It might be extensions under different project names, but I believe that we will see an increase in flexible freelance working as opposed to IR35 constraining it. We'll soon get over the IR35 hurdle, and as I say, platforms will make it easier and more explicit for HMRC and for freelancers to be following the guidance.
Yeah, so Barry, you said that these models are disrupting service providers, and some service providers are actually using them to disrupt the market themselves. And I think a prime example of that is Wipro's Top Loader. If I'm correct, I think they've got over 1 million freelancers actually on their Top Loader platform. and they're using it in a really, really innovative way, and really big brands like Zurich are using it. So it's been proven. It's got past that, you know, proven piece that you need, Graeme, and they're using it to develop, you know, complex software initiatives and projects,
Yep.
and it's all done on a competition basis. So it's
So just a couple of things. I mean, Mike Morris wouldn't forgive me if I didn't say it's top coder as opposed to top loader.
That's the film, isn't it?
Top coder, and actually they're growing at 10,000 people in their community join every month. And they've now got 1.6 million members of their community. And and the typical model, there are two models on top coder, but they specialize mainly in software development and testing and engineering. So it's mainly the technical disciplines, although they do some creative as well. And they're a crowdsourcing platform typically. So, you know, if you're looking for an application that's in an old version of code to be transitioned to a new version that works on AWS, you explain it on top coder, put it out to the audience, to the solvers, if you like, and then they will come back and tell you and compete basically for your work. So it's a sort of reverse of a typical outsourcing model. However, they've also launched, I think it was earlier this year, if not late last year, what they call talent as a service. So they're basically using their 1.6 million people on the platform, looking at their availability and saying, we have Java developers at this rate and they're available for this long, or we have, you know, quantum computing experts, or we have data scientists. And so you can go onto Top Coder and just find resources in the same way as you would in some of the other platforms. But their sort of core business model is a crowdsourcing platform where you put the challenge out there and they compete to win the work. It's a really, really innovative model. And Wipro acquired Aperio in 2016, who owned Top Coder. So Wipro have been trying to integrate it gradually into the Wipro delivery model as well. And we will see much, much more of that from service providers over the next few years.
Yeah, this is a disruption we've been calling for a long time, isn't it, really? And it's actually taken much longer to be realised than I think we probably predicted it would. And whether that's as a result of pandemic forcing the importance of agility or not, then this idea of both existing large service providers having to pivot and change their business models, or of new and emerging challenges in the industry emerging, and it's starting to happen. We're seeing it across all sorts of industries. We've got a customer in the US, a healthcare company called Cavangali, that literally founded itself based on the idea of a flexible resourcing model, using automation as the baseline, using flexible talent to deliver the traditional services into the healthcare industry, like billing and claims management and all the things that most organisations are hampered with legacy. Either doing it themselves or through a service provider, and that is now going to happen. That prediction is going to come true.
Yeah, it reminds me, Terry, of well, cloud back in the day when, you know, the cloud cannibalized the traditional delivery models for service providers, and then RPA, of course, you know, which, you know, again cannibalized some of the work for the service providers were doing themselves with their FTEs, and now this open talent models are exactly the same, and the progressive ones will embrace it and benefit, and some will push against it. And it will, you know, time will tell how successful they will be. But, you know, I predict that outsourcing will be completely disrupted over the next 10 years by both automation and platform delivery models combined. Now, I might be wrong, and it will take a bit of time, but 10 years' time, the landscape will look completely different.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to get, again, both Sunita and Graeme's views on whether you would entertain, are you progressive? You know, whether you'd entertain using this sort of approach, and then Mark, your view on how you're providing it at NTT. Sunita?
So I think it's, so just to jump on what Terry was saying earlier, you know, I think it's fair to say that there was a slow or underlying pipeline of change. You know, there's lots of change emerging before the major disruption in 2020. But, you know, there was various strains, including technology, logistics, people, ways of working. But of course, what we've all witnessed in varying degrees is the rate at which it's been kind of forced to accelerate and execute. There are obviously pros and cons, which you've all mentioned, and without a doubt. But, you know, largely it's effective, and a lot of the change will be here to stay. But I think, you know, where investment is is somewhat of a challenge in many organisations for one reason or another. I think the huge dependency where technology and AI is concerned will be on big data. Now, big data has been around for ages. We've all talked about it for a long time, and it's produced and used and flexible in many different ways. But I think right now, where investment might be a challenge for many organisations, they will be a huge dependency on this big data. So to provide the valuable insights, to look at market and business intel, to look at market sensing, to look at demand translation, to look at trending, to see what, in terms from a sourcing perspective to an output perspective, to how we collaborate with our competitors and all sorts of things. So I think while there is a huge onus on technology and how that will develop as a result of the acceleration of change will be there, but I think key to where investment is a challenge, it will be a huge dependency on data and how we use that.
Okay, thanks, Graeme.
Yeah, so I guess are we progressive yet? Categorically, we are. We're absolutely interested and pushing on with technology solutions that we think that can deliver, I guess, one of two key outcomes for us. Outcome number one is a better customer experience. Outcome number two is a better partner or advisor experience. I think, I'm glad to say that as a business, we have perhaps stopped exhibiting some of the behaviour we exhibited a number of years ago, where every penny was a prisoner. I think we recognise now that actually you need to spend a little in order to accumulate in the longer term. Now, that's dead easy to say, but in the happy world of retail, that's perhaps sometimes easier and more hard, to flush through. I think that, I see flexible resourcing or a flexible customer experience delivery solution absolutely being the answer to some of our problems some of the time. Do I see a situation where I will have that as my full staffing requirement? Absolutely not. But I think that there's absolutely a pile of work, whether it be in front office or back office customer delivery, where either a technology solution or a flexible workforce might well work well for us. And to get down to the nuts and bolts of this, I think that I can think of nobody better to deliver experience to a customer service experience to a John Lewis customer than another John Lewis customer. That's fairly future thinking for us as a business, but it's by no means unachievable. And it will take us a little while to get to that place. But I think that this absolutely will be the answer to some of our problems, but it's not the silver bullet.
If I can just add on that, I think the whole area of what's known in the industry as gig CX, so gig customer experience, of using existing customers to provide typically digital customer feedback, customer support, customer service to other customers is just fascinating. And companies like Limitless and Distributed and Insided that are just doing a great job in this regard. I just think the concept's so brilliant. If you're an existing customer, you could earn some revenue. I don't think you're ever going to earn your living doing this, but you could be commuting to work, if we ever go back to commuting to work, or you could be at home sitting watching TV, and you can, using your phone, be supporting other customers once you've gone through a bit of training, and you get paid every time you do a customer reaction or transaction that gets you 5 stars. You earn a little bit of money to save for Christmas or for your holidays or what have you. And this concept is growing about 20%. We will see more and more customers using other brand ambassadors, other customers to support each other. And I think it's such a great concept.
Well, GiftGaff have done it incredibly well for quite a long time, haven't they? So, right, okay, I'm mindful of time. So I do want to get everybody's wow prediction of what they think is going to change or what they want to see change. And I'm looking at, obviously, the conversation going through. Thanks for all your comments, especially Joel and Dr. Tahir have been very active. But Joel thinks we are at Groundhog day, and we talked the same thing, how we're going to hold the industry to account and actually make some changes. So Mark, I'd start with you.
So whilst I'd agree with you, I think we have made changes in the last 9 months. So I think all the barriers that may have been put in place for cloud or data access or security, we've got through. And so long as we can continue on that path, we can make things happen. I think key to that, I mean, coming back to the points around delivering business outputs, being proud of what we're doing, delivering real change is key. So if you look at actually some of the industries that have been transformed, clearly healthcare, education, to name but a few, we will see much more radical changes in healthcare come through. So the pandemic will force all sorts of new technologies, which will allow proper social distancing using technology. So I think the rate of change will only increase. Clearly that needs to be delivered. And so I see the pandemic accelerating technology change. So whilst I'll agree with you, I think the barriers have been broken and we know that we can do it.
Okay, thank you. Terry.
On mute. That's my prediction for the future, is every conversation will be punctuated by somebody at some point saying, oh, I'm on mute. Listen, I think we've the change that has been forced on us by the conditions of the pandemic is not going to be reversed. And I think all of the barriers, as I kind of said earlier, all of the barriers to change, or many of the barriers to change, have been removed. I think what we'll probably see is a bit of mopping up of some of the relaxation of governance and control that's happened. If you think about some of the transitions to new ways of working, they've been as a result of a forced relaxation of rules, of security guidelines, of governance, of the controls that would otherwise have restricted businesses from making change. And necessarily there's going to be a bit of mopping up that needs to be done to say, actually, have we really got the right level of controls over people in your customer contact centre who are working from home in their kitchen surrounded by their flatmates? Have we really got the data security that's required? Have we allowed things to be relaxed too much, and do we need to bring some of those controls back in? So I think there'll be a level of mopping up of that. But this new approach to embedding change and to being able to force through transformation and transition much more quickly is not going to be reversed. It's with us to stay, and frankly, we should applaud it. It's the change that we've been wanting the industry to make for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Sunita, your wow prediction of change, please.
So it's not far from what Terry and Mark have said already, but just going back to what Mark said when we were talking about restarting the UK, the big thing to remember is don't snap back. That's one thing that you said, and it's kind of stayed as well, that don't snap back. And I agree with Joel to a degree that there will be things that we probably, bad habits that we might slip back into. But I think, if 2020 has shown us anything, is that disruptions can come when you least expect it, and it's not necessarily in the most positive sense of disruption. I think going forward, the focus absolutely must be on preparing for the unpredictable, and that could be in all sorts of forms. But for sure, strengthening supply chains, and that's looking at the three things that we mentioned earlier: people, tech, and tools, and across that all, responsible sourcing.
Yeah, so let's make a quick name check to the work that we're doing, Sunita, on supplier diversity. So there's a big focus from the GSA on supplier diversity in 2021, and we are looking for people to come and work with us on developing some best practice in that area. So if anybody's interested in the subject of supplier diversity, please do get in touch.
Absolutely.
Right, Steve.
So I'm going to go back to a point that you didn't want to raise, which is don't mention the pandemic. But you know, I think if you look back on this last year and reflect, I think we all kind of probably intrinsically knew, but just the importance of collaboration. You know, it's collaboration in the scientific community that has accelerated the development of vaccines from what would have been a 10-year cycle to a 10-month cycle. But now the challenge, of course, is actually distribution. So we're going to hear the word cold chain logistics enter the public consciousness next year, as suppliers will need to innovate and collaborate to distribute vaccines to all locations. You know, what's clear is it's no good just saying, oh well, we're all inoculated in the UK, we're all right, Jack. This is a global pandemic. It's going to require global collaboration. So I think I'm expecting some really innovative collaboration and technology coming out on the back of this next year. And arguably, you know, the development and distribution of this vaccine could be seen as one of the greatest achievements of mankind.
Well, let's hope so, and let's hope this new strain actually still works with the vaccine. So, Terry, or have I already had you?
Yeah.
I did.
I'll go again if you like.
No. Graeme.
Memorable, Terry.
So again, my prediction, I think that we will start to slow down the pace at which we've made decisions in the last 10 months. And I think that the smart businesses will recognise that slowdown and push through those barriers to get to a place where we move away from where everything seems to take forever to everything just happened overnight, and meet that middle ground. I think that the businesses that don't change their pace of change, either in technology or just ways of working, will find it really difficult to survive through 2021.
Yeah, agreed. And Barry, looks like the last word's with you. Well, come back to me.
Well, I'm hugely optimistic. I think we're well, let's face it, we're still in the middle of a pandemic right now, right? So, but we will be at the other side at some point next year. And I think it will lead to a post-COVID bounce, as it's called. The World Economic Forum call it the Great Reset. I do think it's an opportunity for us all to start thinking differently. I think it will lead to, you know, different ways of innovating, different ways of accessing talent, different ways of sourcing, different ways of using technology. It'll all be based around speed, agility, resilience, the things we've talked about. And to pick up on Steve's point, I think collaboration will be a real theme. You know, what the pharmaceutical industry have done is incredible. And I think what better way to collaborate than using, you know, an open innovation platform where you can collaborate with anyone else around the world through curated crowds. So again, I think, you know, to have the final word on crowdsourcing and open talent and open innovation, I'm going to become boring with the time if I haven't already. I definitely think that's a theme that we'll see into 2021 and beyond.
No, completely agree. Mark, did you want to have any last words?
Well, just to be a bit lighter and end on a lighter note before Kerry signs off. So we've got much to look forward to in 2021. It will be the best ever year for sport because we're catching up. So I've got five predictions. Great Britain will be great in the Olympics and the Paralympics in Tokyo with our biggest ever haul of medals. The home nations team, which will be England or Wales, will make the Euro 2020 final in July. We have the Lions tour in South Africa, and we're actually going to smash that. We are going to European. It's the only part of Europe we're actually part of. The Ryder Cup. So that's in Wisconsin in September. We will retain the Ryder Cup. And lastly, if there's any Australians on the call, I apologise. England will win the Ashes next winter in Australia. Win back the Ashes. And I have five sporting predictions.
I would accumulator on that one, and I'm going to go check that now.
And West Ham are going to get relegated. Should we add that one in?
Oh, put West Ham in the top four, but that's unbelievable.
Place your bets now.
Okay, thanks for the lighter-hearted comments. So yeah, so from a GSA perspective, I think it is a really, really exciting time for the industry. It is really a huge opportunity for us to collaborate, come together, and really show the true value of this industry. For me, this industry has far too often been castigated, certainly in the media and certainly by the government as a customer. And I think we've actually really proven ourselves, and this is a huge opportunity to take the positivity from this COVID as a wholesale sort of like repositioning of the industry, and opportunity to really show the value that we deliver. And I think the GSA's done I don't know if people are familiar with this, but done a great body of work on actually bringing the industry associations around the world together to unite and to put forward a global vision for the future of this industry, because we fully believe this is not just going to be a national response. It really is going to be a global response. And we're all, and our research shows that we're all going to carry on using and working with our global partners around the world to continue to deliver the technology and business services our organisations need. So the work for the GSA in 2021 kicks off with a webinar on Brexit and the implications of Brexit for the industry. But then we're going into the world's first ever Festival of Sourcing. So we have a 6-week bonanza of events, webinars, show and tells, open houses, on all of the key subjects that we've touched on today. So I think it's 45 events over a 6-week period, dipping into more detail on strategic sourcing and how the best performing companies actually have a strategic sourcing function, the future of CX, talent and talent as a service, and gig CX and open talent, contracting and how contracting models are changing, automation and how to move towards a much more strategic play in automation and enterprise-wide automation, inclusion and diversity and how important that is for all of our members, and wellness of the workforce, service provider 2.0 and how service providers really are changing. And then entrepreneurs and the sourcing ecosystem and how important it is to bring smaller players into our collabs and into our sourcing ecosystems, so much more. So that's what we've got coming up in the very near future. So I'd like to invite everybody to get involved with us on that. Now, I do know that most of our panelists said they were available to stay on a little bit longer if there was chat ongoing. So I'm going to keep the chat ongoing, and I'm going to carry on building on Joel's Groundhog Day theme. We made everything happen in 9 months. How do we keep this momentum actually happening, and how do we actually stay true to the tech accelerator agenda? So I'm going to start with you, Terry.
I don't think we have a choice, Kerry. I think we have to maintain the pace of change. I think we have this new paradigm about being open to adopt and adapt change has embedded itself into cultures, into expectations, and whether it's in Graeme's perspective, whether it's the customers that expect different things, different responses, different reactions, or whether it's in a business to business sense, the relationships that you've got with your suppliers and your providers. I think those organisations that don't demonstrate agility will not survive.
Yeah, Barry.
Yeah, I agree. I do think we won't go back to the way we were in any way, shape or form, whether that's just the way we live our lives, the way we manage service providers. We will think more innovatively. We will think more in a more agile fashion. I think we'll see a whole host of agile ways of working that we haven't necessarily come to the fore so far, whether it be agile procurement and agile sourcing and agile talent and agile technology. Everything will be based around flexibility and speed to delivery. So I'm, like I said in my summary, I'm hugely optimistic that it will lead to a lot more innovation, a lot more use of digital technology. And so I think the future looks incredibly bright for the sourcing industry, but it will be in a slightly different shape.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, from your perspective, how do we, Joel's question is, what are the enablers for making our predictions come true? How do we make this happen?
I think there's a myriad of ways, but at the end of the day, it's got to come from the top of organisations in terms of how they're resetting their strategies and how they're enabling those strategies to be delivered. So we've touched on collaboration. I think another theme we're going to see next year is a significant uptick in mergers, acquisitions, and divestments, and already actually seeing that as organisations are kind of pivoted around kind of new core purposes or realigned core purposes. So that's going to be proof of the pudding, I suppose. As if you've set a new direction, if there are parts of your business that are no longer relevant to that, is what do you do with those functions? Do you kind of divest them or repurpose those functions to the new kind of reality, the strategy?
Okay, so both the BBC and John Lewis have got new leadership in place, haven't they? You've got a fairly new Director General, and you've got a new Chief Exec Chairperson. Are you feeling that the appetite and the ability to drive this down to the top is now in place for your organisations? Graeme?
I think that what Sharon has brought is a fresh set of non-retail eyes to our business. What we no longer necessarily have is the hang-ups about the legacy and the history of the partnership in terms of how do we push forward. However, if I'm honest, and I guess to come to the question about how will we make sure that we continue to collaborate and drive change, at the heart of that will be the commercials. I think if we don't make commercial models stack up, the appetite to be on the cutting edge of new technology and new ways of working and flexible working will very quickly wane for us. So that whilst there needs to be that customer benefit, there needs to be a bit of commercial certainty in there as well. I think that we're certainly in a place where the emphasis on getting things right for our customers at all of their touch points has definitely had a fresh set of eyes put on it. So whereas historically, for us, customer experience delivery was about what happened to you in the store, and everything that happened that wasn't in the store was about fixing the cock-ups that had perhaps happened at some point down the line. I think now we recognise that actually customer experience delivery doesn't really matter, and the emphasis on it doesn't really matter whether you're standing in Kingston or whether you are sitting at home on your sofa using our customer experience tools through your iPad. So to get to a place where we can deliver that experience to you just as well and just as fully has to be the key change for us in the next 12 or 18 months.
I think, Graeme, that's it's really hard challenge, isn't it? Because John Lewis has been known for its incredible customer experience in store. It's what differentiates you. Go to a store in Kingston and you want to buy a stereo. The John Lewis partner will know more about that stereo than going into any other department store and will give you an amazing customer experience. Bringing that online using digital tools and a mixture of human and digital technology, it's incredibly hard to differentiate yourself through customer service when other retailers can offer the same thing. And how you do that, I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm sure you will do it, I just think it's going to be an incredibly challenging thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that particularly these days when everything costs the same everywhere, there's a perception that some retailers are more expensive than others. Actually, these days we're really not. If you're buying comparable products, and I think that it comes to Barry's point there about the John Lewis partner in store being particularly knowledgeable. Actually, there's nothing to stop that John Lewis partner in store providing services to customers just through a digital platform.
Yeah. And
Mark, sorry, we'll talk about mini disc players for you in a minute if you want.
I just saw someone what's a stereo. I showed my age.
Just to answer your question there, Kerry. So yeah, fundamentally we still have the commitment to uphold in terms of entertainment and education and informing our audiences. But that with a fresh lens from now Tim Davey, there's a huge focus on creative diversity, but also in the workplace as well. And that's really touching on the people element of the prediction that I was talking about earlier. And, you know, being more customer centric, so that's our audiences, and having a real reinvigoration of having that connection. But that can't go without having the relevant technology and tools in place to give us the insights we talked about earlier, the intel we talked about earlier, market sensing, looking at demographics, looking at you know, who's tuning in when, what method that they're looking at, that they're using for their entertainment purposes. So absolutely, you know, there is a fresh lens on creative diversity, but it doesn't go without using the intelligence from business and market, using the technology that's there and available as well.
Okay, thank you. So obviously we're hearing that culture, top-down approach is key, and then also this sort of like getting the commercials right. Mark, how are the commercials changing within NTT, and how are you adapting? So one of the questions was, how do I contract, you know, for all these freelancers? You know, what's your commercial answer to that?
So a couple of points pick up first of all. So firstly, we've seen a huge acceleration. Come back to your point, Steve, around you saw some stagnation in the early part of COVID. We actually saw business growth, huge business growth throughout pandemic. So we've seen an increase in conversations, an increase in contracts, an increase in RFPs, RFIs. So that's the first point. I think we've got every element of traditional contracting, and I say traditional contracting, perhaps to Graeme's point, where we go risk and reward in a contract, and there's plenty of risk but no reward for the supplier. And there's outputs contracted to, but the buyer also wants to specify all of the detail around how you deliver, which is a bit like having handcuffs. So we've got that legacy holding us back, and then we've got true unit priced business output or business outcome pricing as well that we're moving to. So I think we've got the entire spectrum. I think from a supplier's perspective, and this is just the practicality, you can't do all of the spectrum because otherwise you have too much risk in your portfolio. So you have to have a blend across your business to manage that so that you can get to where you need to be, which clearly is agile, aligned to business, flexible, ultimately, and change like that. But I would say that blend. So I know I haven't answered your question, Kerry, but
you never do.
We see, yeah, that's the spectrum that you have to deal with, and I guess I think it's a buy side and supply side responsibility, quite frankly, to get to appropriate contracts. And I come back to my point: when you have a good relationship and you create a relationship and you create a contract together, you truly develop something that is win-win. Because any contract win-lose clearly might be okay, but quickly.
Okay, right. Chris, I see you've got your hand up. I would love to invite you into the conversation. If you'd like to come, and if you're coming off mute.
I am.
Oh, it's Chris Hallard. I had no idea which Chris it was. You were just Chris. If I'd known it was you, I'd have left you out. I'm joking. Welcome, Chris.
I wanted to thank you. Good to see you all. And I must say, I've just enjoyed today's conversation enormously. I think it's been really high quality stuff, really insightful, really interesting. So well done, everybody, for all of your contributions. I just wanted to go back, if I may, just go back quickly to what do we need to do in order to make sure that these things happen. And it's been my hobby horse for years, really, that I've never really thought, particularly on the supply side, that suppliers have formed these advocacy groups So as a group, they can be holding the line against all of the criticism that is thrown at outsourcing. I think outsourcing is and always will be an important activity. It provides all of that scale and collaboration and all of those great things, but it gets so much criticism. And I think sometimes what we need is to have the industry to stand up and start pointing out, this is what we actually do here. You know, these are the great things that we contribute to the way that, you know, the way that organisations work, not just private, but public sector as well. So I think, you know, Kerry, your initiative to try and bring associations together across the world, fantastic. I mean, we need more of that. Getting more senior people from the big outsourcers to actually join in with that debate, I think is so important to give that kind of momentum to the outsourcing concept, however it is delivered in detail. So that's my 3 halfpence worth, 4 halfpence worth even.
No, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we do keep trying to promote the virtues of the industry, whether it's through our awards, through publishing case studies, you know, and obviously through the latest work of the Global Technology and Business Services Council. And we will continue. And if anyone's got you know, suggestions on how we do that better, then please do let us know. So I think we should probably call it a wrap now, because we are over, and I'm sure people do have other meetings to go on to. And I'd just like to thank you all very much for participating. So all of our speakers, all of our participants, delegates, I don't know what you call them in the virtual world, but thank you very much. And I wish you all absolutely fantastic festive seasons. And here's to 2021 being an absolutely phenomenal year. So yeah, I think on that note, I will say thank you all and goodbye and happy 2021.
Thank you very much all.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Good
Thanks.
break.
Bye.